when people look at you and they don't see you, they look past you.
It's about believing that something should be different and having the courage to live in that transition zone.
We contain multitudes.
Why did I feel so awful so much of the time?
It is a place that is so steeped in like white patriarchy, and yet I never felt more myself and more among Black people.
The women's rooms, they were basically men's rooms, and the urinals were still in there.
I feel like I spent so much time trying to educate the Amherst College community that I didn't get enough time to just be a student.
This is Black Women of Amherst College, a storytelling project exploring the experiences and impact of Black women in elite higher education. I'm Nichelle Carr, Amherst College, class of 1998. In this episode, we're going to tell you about Professor Sonia Sanchez and her role in the beginnings of the Black Studies Department at Amherst College. The reason we want to tell you this story is to highlight the investment in Black studies as symbolic of a broader commitment to Black intellectual thought at institutions like Amherst. Today, the Black Studies Department at Amherst is one of the best in the country and continues to add to its excellent faculty. That was not always the case. The process of becoming the Black Studies Department we know today was a journey where Black women have played a huge role from the very beginning. And building and sustaining this department almost didn't happen. What we're going to do now is go back.
On strike, shut it down! On strike, shut it down! On strike!
In the early 1960s, there really weren't any African American or Black Studies departments at any white colleges in America. But in 1966, after a series of student protests, San Francisco State University started one of the first Black Studies programs.
We're going to ask people to come out of classes. And the point is, we're saying that people are going to come out of classes and the school's going to be closed down.
This was the first program of its kind at a traditionally white university. And one of the individuals who was most instrumental in getting this new academic movement in America off the ground was a woman named Sonia Sanchez. Now stop and think about it for a second. For decades and centuries, really since the colonization of America and enslavement of Africans by Europeans, Black intellectual thought had been essentially suppressed. It's only in the heat of the civil rights and Black power movements that traditionally white institutions would even begin to consider Black studies as a legitimate academic discipline. So the very notion of building a Black studies program from the ground up was no simple task. The way Sonia Sanchez tells the story, for her, it all starts at a place called the Schomburg Center in New York City.
Came out 135th Street, crossed 135th Street and Lenox, and saw the sign that said, no, Schomburg. And the guy was outside smoking a quick cigarette. And I said, excuse me, sir, what is the Schomburg? He said, lady, go inside, sign in the book, go up the steps, and you'll see.
The Schomburg is the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, a research library in Harlem. It's now part of the New York Public Library system, and since at least the 1920s, librarians and curators at the Schomburg have been developing a robust collection of writings and resources about Black literature, philosophy, history, and all aspects of Black culture. But Sonia Sanchez didn't know all that just yet.
I went inside into this huge room, and there was this long table, and nothing but Black men, African men sitting there with books stacked. The Schomburg is a library that has books only by and about Negroes. And I said with my fresh mouth, I said, there must not be many books in here then. Yes, I was that stupid, right, at one time. And a woman by the name of Jean Hudson, she brought me to a table, and she made all those men who were spread out make room for me.
Jean Hudson was the chief of the center, one of the most important librarians and archivists in the Schomburg's history, and in American history.
She pushed the chair, she said, stay here. And I sat there, and I remember looking at my watch, 20 minutes had passed, and I said, she probably forgot me. And all of a sudden, she came with 3 books, Up from Slavery, Souls of Black Folk, and Their Eyes Are Watching God was on top.
Let's take a pause for a second here, because these books that were placed in front of Sonia Sanchez on this fateful day at the Schomburg included Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington and The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. As you might remember from our last episode, in the early 20th century, there was a debate about how best to educate the Black community. In one camp was Washington, who advocated for a pragmatic education that focused on learning a trade and gaining economic empowerment. On the other side was Du Bois, who emphasized a liberal arts education and the pursuit of social and political equality. The third book that Jean Hudson gave Sonia, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, is a legendary novel written by an extraordinary Black woman. And I wonder if it also stands in the forefront of Sonia's mind because it speaks to the artistry within Sonia that led to her later poetry, which is legendary in its own right. So when I was interviewing Sonia and she listed these titles, I rattled them off in my head. Of course, classic, classic, classic. But later, it occurred to me that I know these books to be classics because she helped to build the academic tradition that finally recognized these works as classics. That is the legacy and gift of Black studies to young Black students. So as Sonia Sanchez is sitting there with these books, she has an awakening.
And I slid up from the chair and knocked on the door. I had tears in my eyes. I said, "But what's your name again?" She said, "Miss Hudson." I said, "Miss Hudson, how could I be a graduate of a college in New York City, the most progressive city supposedly in the country, and I never come across these people?" She said, "Oh, my dear, go sit down. I'll make sure that you get all the books you need. Just sit down, Sonia," she said. "I am going to give you things you have never imagined." And the rest of that semester that I graduated from, and that summer, she gave me every possible book to read. And so I started asking people, "Did you read Souls of Black Folk?" And people said, girl, where did you get that from? Because no one's teaching it and training people to teach Black Lit. There I was, with all those books.
I have to tell you, I graduated from college in 1998. I was a Black Studies major. And the way you responded when you got to the Schomburg of saying, how am I an educated woman and I did not know about this? I feel the same way about you. How is it that I graduated from Amherst College, went there, studied there, graduated, been graduated for over 20 years, and I did not know that we had one of the pioneers of Black studies at our college during the advent of Black studies, that I, as a Black woman, did not know about the first Black woman professor at Amherst College, right? Like, I am still angry about that. So to reiterate, Sonia Sanchez was at Amherst College. She was the first Black woman on the faculty. After helping to establish Black studies at SF State, she spent the next several years bringing Black studies to other institutions, including the University of Pittsburgh and the City University of New York. But Amherst was the first elite college to invite her expertise in this new discipline. She was brought in to build the Black Studies program, which began as a direct result of student protests. Professor Sanchez arrived at Amherst in 1972.
I actually knew from my experience in New York. I mean, the whole idea of Black studies in New York City, you would think that people would say, good old liberal New York City, like, boom, we got it. That was not the case. I didn't look like any of the other professors up there, but I knew that this was not going to be an easy sell. I knew that we were like treading on new ground, just as I think many of them were not interested in women coming there. They were not necessarily interested in something called Black studies.
Professor Sanchez saw the discipline of Black studies as a study of culture, intellectual history, and identity, as well as a challenge to the institutional biases of American universities.
It is indeed the study of Blackness, a study that you should be involved in so thoroughly that, you should, when the bell rings and when it's time to leave, you should be seated there, fascinated by it all. Say, hey, come on, teach me 30 minutes extra. Teach me some more, because there's so much I have got to learn about myself. And there ain't enough time in this classroom, 2 hours, to tell me all about myself. That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about destroying the things that told you that you wasn't nothing, that you shouldn't learn, that you were stupid, that you were inferior. And it's a hard struggle, is it not?
There was a history that they were walking with, that they were traveling with. I used to call them you're my little geniuses, whatever you are here. Don't ever think you're here as simply that they had to get some black faces or some brown faces coming in there. No, 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 you were good. And that's why you're here. And I do know that I was hard. I mean, that much I know. If you did something and it was not good, I never failed anyone, period. I would say to them, you're not doing the kind of work. I would never want you to go and say you study with me. I'd be embarrassed by that. You're not embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I said, so why don't you drop this course? And when you're ready to come back and learn, hey, it's open. You can withdraw passing. No failure attached to anything at all. Never be a fool on the world stage. So you can't be a fool in my class. I refuse to let you be a fool in the class. Go someplace that you feel comfortable being a fool, but not in my class. There's too much history and history. There are too many people in here, who died for this to come about.
While building Black Studies at Amherst, Professor Sanchez soon found herself bearing witness to a traumatic event that deeply affected the Black community and Amherst College as a whole, which again, at the time, was still an all-male school. In 1973, her second year at Amherst, she met a first-year student named Gerald Penny.
It's always very hard for me to go right into Gerald. Student came up to me. He said, my name is Gerald Penny. He says, but you can excuse the last name Penny because I'm worth much more than a penny. And I'm looking at him thinking, I hear you. I said, well, I'll get you maybe later on when you are a sophomore or whatever, and you'll leave that tag behind someplace. And he said, I write poetry. I remember he said that. I don't know. But he didn't say it in like some of the other students said, like, I write poetry, whatever. It was like a kind of, he wasn't sure he wrote poetry, if you know what I'm saying.
So one night, about a month later, Professor Sanchez gets a knock on her door at home.
There were 3 students from Amherst, and they said, Professor Sanchez, they had tears in their eyes. They said, Gerald Penny has drowned in the pool. And I said, how is that possible? They said, well, one of the things you're supposed to do is swim that length of the pool. I don't know if it's still one of the things you have to do now. And they said, we neglected to tell him that you really don't have to do it, whatever. And he was this young, I think he was 17 years of age, this young kid from New Orleans, and he got in the pool in the evening and they found him floating in the pool.
Back in the day, Amherst College asked all incoming students to pass a swimming test in the college pool. Gerald Penny was not a strong swimmer, but in spite of that, he attempted to pass the test. It's hard to know exactly what happened, but at some point, it was discovered that he had drowned in the pool. A group of students went to Professor Sanchez for help. She was at home that evening with her children and a sitter.
And I said, feed the children. I'm going to go out. I'll be back soon. And they had taken him out of the pool, and he was on there on the floor. And I said, you have got to pick him up and take him off this cold cement, this cold marble, and put him someplace safe. And then I went to see President Ward. More students came with me. And then I was asked if I would call the mother.
Who asked you?
The president asked me to call. And I realized that he would not be able to do it. And so I said, yes, I would do it. And then I remember we came back to my office, actually, and we all crowded around. President Ward gave me the number, and the students were standing, and I dialed the first time. And when it rang, I hung up. And then I sat there and looked, and they were shocked. And so I picked up the phone again, and it rang, and there was this little tiny voice answer the phone. And I said, who are you? And it was a Penny, one of the young children. And I said, how old are you? And he told me how old he was. And I said, is your mother home? And he said, yes. I said, would you mind calling her and tell her that Professor Sanchez is calling? And she came to the phone. And the students were quiet. They were so quiet. They just stood there. The office was still, just still. And I had to still myself to not break down, because she will break down. You need to talk to her. You need to hold her across these wires. I had to talk to her about a child that they had sent to a place to be educated, and then death was following him, and I was telling her about death of a child, and I said it softly, and she started to cry, and we're so sorry that this did not happen here, but what I will help you do is I will help you get a lawyer.
Professor Sanchez hangs up the phone and looks up at the students gathered in her office, who were looking back at her in a state of complete grief and shock.
I knew that I had to remove the guilt from some of those students who felt that they had not taken care of this young student. They kept saying we should have told him that he really did not have to swim the length of that pool, especially since he didn't feel like he was a good swimmer. And so he kept asking people, do you have to swim that you actually do? And they said, yeah, man, it's simple. But it really meant that he was probably nervous about his ability to swim.
I just want to pause for a minute because there's so much to unpack here. So much of this story hits me in the gut, and so much reflects larger issues in American society. According to Professor Sanchez, Gerald's lifeless body was left out by the poolside for an unknown period of time. To me, this is yet another demonstration of the lack of care and value placed on Black lives. Then, the president, whose job it is to represent and speak for the college, especially to the parents of students, put the burden on this young, Black female visiting professor at this all-men's college to deliver the worst possible news to Gerald's parents. Sonia Sanchez knew that this president was not capable of making that call. At the same time, she recognized that neither the president nor the college were capable of supporting these Black students in this moment of intense confusion, fear, and shock. So after speaking with the Penny family, Professor Sanchez accompanies the students back to their house on campus.
And we sat down. I talked to them the whole night. I let them talk about what they felt, what this really meant. We talked about supporting each other, that we were here as a group. We were part of history and history. And part of that history was that we had to protect each other and look out for each other. That this was not going to be an easy experience for all of us at Amherst College, that this was not going to be an easy walk. But the point is that we had to understand the importance of sticking together, supporting each other, always.
Many in the Amherst College community are aware of the Gerald Penny story. It reverberates across the campus and through time, thanks to the Gerald Penny Black Cultural Center in the Octagon building. As a Black alumna, I certainly know this story, but I had never heard this vivid, first-hand account. I have never met anyone who knew Gerald Penny when he was alive, before he became an eternal memorial. And I had no idea that in this time before coeducation, it was a young Black woman who carried the college leadership and the students through their paralyzing pain.
I wish to officially welcome each and every one of you to our campus.
While working on this project, we came across this tape from the Amherst College archives, dated April 19th, 1975. It's black and white and grainy, but you can clearly see well-dressed Black folks, dressed for a special occasion, in fact, walk one by one up to a microphone.
Too often, the good that people do is not recognized until long after they are gone from our presence and our ability to love. We at Amherst are aware of our good fortune in having Sister Sonia Sanchez on our campus and in the Valley. She has traveled where we dare not dream to go. She beckons us to be Black movers, to be Black lovers, to be Black warriors, to be Black doers. It is only appropriate that we at Amherst should take a day of our lives to say to one whom we owe so very much, to say that we love you, but moreover that we appreciate you.
Students then read letters to Sonia from Black artists and intellectuals across the country. Alice Walker, Gwendolyn Brooks, Maya Angelou.
Person who has been both consistent and expansive in her commitment and undying love to our people. Without her, the way for Black people in our country would be much darker.
Audre Lorde is there. Jean Hudson, the curator of the Schomburg Center, the woman who led Sonia's journey into Black intellectual thought, she's there too. And finally, at the end of the recording, Professor Sonia Sanchez herself.
I believe in work, and I believe that the brothers are here to learn. Without that knowledge, we are nobody. A great man said recently that man is mind, and what that means simply is that without the use of our minds, we are no place, going no place, will be no place. And so I say to you, even if I'm not here at a place called Amherst College, that you and the people coming behind you must have a tradition of learning.
Sonia Sanchez left the college in 1975. She voted for coeducation, but left before the first class of freshman women ever set foot on this campus.
I am Rhonda Cobham-Sander. I teach Caribbean and African literature at Amherst, and I'm in the English department and the Black Studies department. I've been here since 1986, so I guess that makes it almost 36 years, something horrible.
Did you know that she had been there when you got there? Like, was she talked about at all?
No, I did not know. I had met Sonia Sanchez. We had been on a committee together before I came to Amherst, but I did not know that she had a connection to Amherst, as was true of so many Black faculty members. Sonia was not a tenure-track professor. She didn't get the same kind of attention that the other pioneering women at Amherst who were there in those early days have gotten.
In the years after Sonia Sanchez left Amherst, the momentum to build a Black Studies department at the college faded.
There were no faculty, there were no majors, there were a few people who taught courses, but it didn't seem as if the department could survive as a department. I think it had moved from being a really exciting, vibrant place, as was true for many Black Studies departments across the country, to not having as much of a presence on campus.
Professor Rhonda Cobham-Sander came to Amherst in 1986. She arrived to find that the college had not adequately supported the Black Studies department, and as a result, it had fallen into disarray. In the years before Rhonda arrived, but after Sonia left, the burden of keeping the department going, of keeping the principle and the movement of Black Studies alive, largely fell to two Black women professors, Andrea Rushing and Mavis Campbell. It was around the time of Rhonda's arrival in the mid-'80s that the college finally decided to renew its commitment to Black Studies and to make a significant investment in the Black Studies department as a standalone unit, rather than a scattered offering of so-called Black-focused courses across the various more traditional academic departments like English, history, philosophy, and others. As a young faculty member, one of the first things Professor Cobham-Sander was asked to do was to help turn things around, especially since it was clear that the students wanted an independent and cohesive Black Studies department.
Even though when I first got to Amherst, the Black Studies department was in the process of rebuilding, there were still students who had found ways, even if they didn't have a Black Studies major, to be part of what the presence of Black women at Amherst made possible. The students were part of the reason why the college decided to reinvest in the department.
From the start, one of the things that distinguished the Black Studies department at Amherst was its focus on the entire African diaspora.
It was never just meant to be an African American studies department. It looked at the Black experience in Africa, the Caribbean, African America, and in fact, in all other kinds of parts of the world. And that's remained our central philosophy, the idea that we're an interdisciplinary and cross-cultural department. And one of the ways in which we strengthen the knowledge around race is to see it not in isolation.
Amherst made a few significant faculty hires, and before long, the Black Studies department was starting to grow.
I came in 86. By 1990, we had a department that was beginning to really pull students in, students wanting to major, students seeing the department as a place to grow both personally, intellectually, socially. It became this meeting ground for lots of people. Over the next 10 years, the college put a lot of resources into rebuilding the department. And today we have what I think is everyone considers one of the strongest departments at Amherst, as well as one of the strongest Black Studies departments nationally.
Over the years, the Black Studies department has had many homes on the Amherst campus. Now, and hopefully forever, it finds its home in Cooper House, which was the faculty housing where Sonia Sanchez lived while she was a professor at Amherst.
I have this little romantic notion, I don't know if it's true or not, that my office is actually her old living room, which it might have been.
By and large, over the past 3 decades, Amherst has made good on its intention to be a leader in Black studies. Still, I find it incredible that I, as a student and as a Black Studies major, had no idea that Sonia Sanchez had ever been here. In contrast, I learned very early on about Gerald Penny, and am consistently reminded of the tragedy that surrounds him. Gerald Penny has a place named after him. Sonia does not. This speaks volumes to me about how and why predominantly white and traditionally elite institutions choose to see Black people. Every institution and every group of people, every culture, chooses to hold up certain memories while burying others. Is it right that we remember Gerald Penny and not Sonia Sanchez? Does it have anything to do with the idea that Gerald Penny's encounter with Amherst fits into a paternalistic narrative of Black suffering and martyrdom that feels familiar and perhaps subconsciously comfortable to many? Does it have anything to do with the fact that Sonia Sanchez entered Amherst as a professional and intellectual equal to the college establishment and symbolized a radical change to the status quo? Why does it seem that there is not enough space to honor both a young man who lost his life just as he was reaching the peak of his potential, and to also honor a young woman who challenged Amherst to grow and change in ways it had never before contemplated? Thus far in our series, we've learned about how Black women have had an unrecognized impact in shaping the agenda and the identity of the college. What we haven't learned about yet is the experiences of Black women students. So in the next 2 episodes, we're going to meet some of the Black alumni from across the decades. And in order to help me make sense of the range of experiences I heard, I decided to invite my friend Tanae from the class of 2001 to be a guest host for these next 2 episodes.
That was often a calculation that one needed to make as a Black woman in a space like Amherst. The cost-benefit analysis is, what is it going to cost me in this situation to show up as my authentic self?
Thanks for listening to Black Women of Amherst College. This series is a production of Amherst College, WC1 Studios, and Zell Division. I'm Nichelle Carr, executive producer and host. It was edited by Michael Osborne and produced by Jennifer Hsu and Trisha Nelson. Our engineers were Erica Huang and Evan Viola. Special thanks to all the women and other members of the Amherst College community who participated in and supported the project, including all of our storyteller interviewees, Tanae Adaro-Howard, President Biddy Martin, Mike Kelly, and the project steering committee, Rhonda Cobham-Sander, Martin Garner, Sandy Janelius, Cree Polk, Kate Salop, Bette Schumacher, Victoria Wilson, and Norm Jones. This series is dedicated to all of the Black women of Amherst College, past, present, and future.